Are you claiming to be a church today? Are you a pastor, a Sunday school teacher, anyone who has a neighbor that is suffering untold problems? Did you look at that neighbor and see that they are so overwhelmed that they cry, and you think that because they cry they're crazy? Do you look upon them as though the problems that they have are so overwhelming that you cannot possibly help them? Well, love thy neighbor as thyself. Do you not pray for them because they don't go to your church? They really can't even function enough to be able to even think to go to your church. Do you know if they have a potty, a place to go to the bathroom? Or do you know that they don't have one? Do you threaten them? Do you trouble them? Do you try to control them to try to make them do what you think they ought to do? Do you blame them? Do you say that you're in this condition because you refuse to do this and you refuse to do that? Ask yourself one great big question. Are you loving your neighbor as yourself? Are you doing unto them what you would have others do unto you? Or do you pass by them every Sunday or every Wednesday or twice on Sunday and walk into the doors of your church and you never ever see to it that you can find some way, even through a community program or something, to make sure that they have 3 meals a day, to make sure that they have running water? Sure, the problem is overwhelming. Maybe perhaps the house they live in is falling apart. But have you done your best? If they own the property and it's next to you, why haven't you done something to gather up enough money that they could get a little camper and live in that camper for to face the winter and the cold? That at least make sure that the pipes to the camper are wrapped up, that they'll never freeze. Make sure that they have clothes on their back and a place to shower and be clean. Oh, but they're just living in squalor. How horrible they are. Their minds so filled with their needs that they cry constantly because they cannot see above what is happening to them. But yet, you're their neighbor. Why, you belong to Jesus Christ. Why, you go out and you give money for the missionaries who go out and do things. Where is the missionary for your neighbor? Where is the friend? You go out and you help. Other people build churches. Other people work that don't have any understanding. But your neighbor is dying right next door to you. And you expect everybody else to do something, but not you. Not you. Well, she shouldn't have, or he shouldn't have, or they wouldn't, or they couldn't, or they didn't. He did not tell you that your neighbor had to be your social buddy. Your neighbor didn't have to be someone you fellowship with. Your neighbor didn't have to be your friend. What your neighbor had to be was someone like the one that was laying on the road. in the book of Matthew and had a great need where the hypocrites walked around him daily and went to the other side of the street. Are you on the other side of the street? Are you one of the ones that could have done something? Perhaps go and talk to your pastor why your neighbor is living that way and they haven't done anything to help that person. Oh, I see. Their problems are so overwhelming. It'll drain from the money of the church. The missionaries out there, they need the money while your neighbor dies. What? That neighbor won't listen. They won't do a thing we tell it to do. They won't even try. Well, why don't you try to feed them? Why don't you try to find a way to at least get them a commode? Why don't you try to help them? Why don't you reach out your hand and gather up in your church all of the parties that you have, all of the abundance? Why don't you take a plate over to them? You don't have to sit and talk with them if you don't want to be dirtied. You don't have to sit and do any one thing with them if you don't want to be tainted. All you have to do is show compassion and love that Jesus would have done. Oh, I know. But you love Jesus. I'm talking more to the pastors of church that live next door to people that are not like them, who do not believe like them. How in the world do you think you win them to church? By warning them? By your speech? Love covers a multitude of sins. When you reach out your hand to help somebody, it better be your neighbor first. Oh, but it's your friends. It's your local this. Oh, you help this one because you know you can influence them and you can get something out of them. You help this one because you know they will work in the church and they will give you everything. You help that one because you know. But if no matter what this neighbor believes, no matter what is going on in their life, no matter why they can't, and their house rots underneath them. So what do? You threaten them that you'll have them put in a home. That if you so threatening that they cannot bear and they are afraid. Who is your neighbor? Are they the one that shares everything with you in church? The one that you give everything to and do everything to? Are they that? And you look at your neighbor who looks like they're living in a sinkhole. And you look at them. Well, I can't touch that. If I do that, it'll cause me such overwhelming troubles. What does it cost you to find out how to be able to have at least 3 meals a day go to their house? What does it cost you to try to find out in the community how you can help them still live? Well, they will never leave their house. They should put this up for sale. They should do this to their house. They should. Winter's coming. Do they have a warm place to sleep? Do you know how to overcome for them and for yourself? Do you know how to pray? But you say, well, I've prayed. And if I touch it, it seems like I fall into this sinkhole. and you don't know how to rebuke that so that you don't, that the Word of God become true in you, that nothing is impossible with God, and if you do the right thing with your neighbor, God will be with you. Oh, but you could do it out there where everybody can see that you do this and you do that. Find out. Seek God how you can help your neighbor. Seek out that neighbor. They must believe with all their heart that God will make a way for them. Even if they made bad decisions, even if they've done things wrong, they must believe. How do you draw people into your church if not by love? Oh, but we don't need that kind, because that is a burden, and that is just too heavy to carry. Why, we need this one that wears a nice suit or a nice dress and that gives. We need that one. Why should we go to the community or even go to GoFundMe and go and find out how to raise enough money to get your neighbor out of squalor? Why should we do that? That's not our responsibility. They belong to someone else. That's not our church. That's not the way we operate. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. When you go and do to the limit of what you can do, it's one thing. But when you go to, oh, well, uh, a kind word, maybe I said hello to them when I saw them. Do you see them in the grocery store? Do you see them? Do you see your neighbor at all? Before you touch your neighbor to help them, you need to pray that you can have the means to help them. Start finding out from God how to help your neighbor, even if they don't believe like you. Now, if your neighbor is the kind of person that you know, they believe in something that says, hey, it's okay to do this, so it's okay. That's one thing. But when your neighbor claims to be a Christian and is trusting in God to somehow save them, you better make sure that you do the right thing with them. I'm not telling you what to do with them. I'm not telling you how to operate with them. I'm telling you to pray. Because there's a lot of neighbors out there that are suffering and dying and no one cares. But the church operates for itself. The church, why, they need a new jet. Why, why, they need to be able to go out into the other countries and help others. Why, they need money for their television programs and the clothing, the wonderful clothing they wear. Why, they need money to go to their banquets and after church they go to dinner. They go to lunch while their neighbor has nothing on their plate. Oh, but we're Christians. We have the heart and tender heart of Christ. You know, there is a certain church that I know has a doctrine of once saved, always saved. And they have a neighbor just like the one I'm talking about. And they haven't lifted one finger. Oh, they threaten them. They will do everything to try to control them. They don't even know. If you knew that you helped your neighbor at least have a camper for the winter, and you took up a collection to do it, and you sent the help that you know, because you know people in the neighborhood that can do these things. If you do that, who knows? God may bless you enough that God might do something with that property that you don't have to pass by and play and pretend you don't see it. And your neighbor, I pray. I pray that the overwhelming power of the enemy does not cause them to stop looking up, to stop believing in God, that somehow, some way, someone will come and help them without putting them in a home, without terrifying them that they will lose all and what little bit they have. Someone who knows how, someone who won't sit and judge them. How could they look up when they see judges, condemners, liars, cheats, sitting high and lifted up? The Word of God says, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Oh, but you're afraid because that neighbor could be this and could be that, and you don't have enough of God to discern and feel in the Spirit who is and who isn't. You don't have enough time to spend with God for you to find out who is and who isn't.